very important aspects around data security is on how we're going to be securing some of these services as part of the Azure Data Platform. So in this module, we're going to spend some time on the different methods and capabilities. And personally, I kind of feel, Chris, that some of the topics we'll be covering really relate well to Azure as a platform when I think about things like audits and detection of threat analytics, those kind of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, and they're covered in Azure Fundamentals, right? So we are naturally going to find that there's some crossover here with Azure Fundamentals, right? But it would be remiss of us not to call out the content here. So much so it's the biggest module. Yep. It's got 5 lessons, right? With an introduction to security in lesson 1, key security components in lesson 2, and then basically the way we break it down is in lesson 3 it's about securing the storage accounts and data lake storage.
Yep. Makes sense.
Lesson 4 is about securing data stores like SQL database,
Migrating to access
store.
control.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then finally, let's talk about securing streaming data as well. So we kind of broke it down in those areas. Now, when it comes to an introduction to security, to be fair, I think, you know, a lot of these objectives you will be familiar with as trainers. So there's nothing specific I want to call out here. Really. In fact, Azure Government's on Azure Fundamentals, as is the Azure Security Center. We all know that, you know, security is a shared responsibility between our customers and us here at Microsoft. And it's all about that layered approach to security. So I'm not going to focus on any specific slide, really, here, because this is stuff that I would expect you to know because of Azure Fundamentals and because of just your general knowledge. In lesson 2, the key security components, again, as MCTs, I would expect you to be very familiar with this stuff, right? Network level security, identity and access management, encryption capabilities built into Azure, and advanced threat protection. Yes, you could turn around and go, they are on Azure Fundamentals, which they are. There is inevitably going to be crossover with the Azure Fundamentals with what we do.
So that kind of feels to me this is more like a reinforcement of already assumed or presumed knowledge.
That's a really fair point, because we sat there and thought we would rather take the safest path and assume that people in the room didn't know it, and we know how security is important to us here at Microsoft, and just cover it just to be safe. But there's nothing really on the slides that I would call out as that I want to focus on, because I would expect trainers to know the difference between authentication and authorization, and encryption at rest and encryption in transit, and the fact that Azure Threat Protection can help them in the assessments of security in their Azure estate. So really, you know, it's kind of...
And it's to address these typical questions you might get from customers where they're going to go, well, about what about encryption? What about data in transit? Those kind of pretty much generic Azure targeted security questions. But I think one strong selling point is the Azure Security Center, or the threat analytics and detection as well.
Sure. But now we focus more on the specifics, right? So in lesson 3, we're looking at security in the context of storage accounts and data lake storage. So here, we're looking at the ways Azure Storage protects your data. Really important to understand the difference between a storage account key and a shared access signature. Learn a bit more about advanced threat detection, control network access to the data, and then exploring Azure Data Lake that has that enterprise class security features, particularly with Generation 2. So, you know, the fact that encryption at rest, encryption in transit becomes important from a storage account perspective. We've already got encryption at rest with storage accounts. What you're saying with encryption in transit is, at the end of the day, you know, if you've got the feature of encryption at rest in the storage account, but you choose to transmit data over an unencrypted, then you're only as strong as your weakest link. That's the point we're calling out here.
Fair point.
But you are saying that, you know, with storage accounts, we do have the role-based access control and auditing access as well. Storage account keys, show them in the portal where it is. You've probably created one at this stage already. So just take them in there, right?
You did.
And then with shared access signatures, show them that as well. and the fact that this is really useful in providing granular permissions to third party on a specific IP address range over a specific time frame, it really provides that granular level of control, which is really good for handing out to third party. Controlling network access to data. This is about the firewall settings and making sure that you understand that you can control access at a network level as well.
Which goes into virtual networking and so on as well.
Yeah, and we decided not to go specifically into that because that's covered in Rob's team. They do all that. But yeah, it's definitely a tip to the hat in that area. And then managing encryption, you know, being aware that transport layer security is inherent within SQL database and SQL data warehouse. Transparent data encryption is in place that provides that real-time encryption and decryption of database. But don't forget, you know, application level encryption as well, you know, which we don't cover in this course, but it would be remiss of us to ignore that because it's the weakest link, you know, it's only as strong as your weakest link. So we call that out as well. Advanced threat protection, again, just reinforcing that this can be used in conjunction with the data platform technologies as much as it can be used in general. Data Lake Storage Gen 2 features, role-based access control, POSIX compliant access control list, Azure Active Directory OAuth 2 tokens. We've got Azure Services integration and inbuilt encryption. Yeah, so really enterprise class stuff. Review questions, and then we move on to data stores, specifically using firewall rules, going more into authentication and authorization, protecting data in transit at rest, and then auditing and monitoring SQL database for access violations.
And I think one of the things and the key takeaways you want you to have from this module, and we want your students to have, is to understand the differences in monitoring. The way you're going to be monitoring a SQL database for an access violation is different than monitoring an Azure Blob Storage. And it's kind of key to understand those nuances and differences, and then understand that, I mean, again, this is not a data management course, it's a data engineering course. So when we think about how you're going to be providing access to tables and read-only permissions on objects and so on within the table in a relational engine is not covered here. It's kind of mentioned, but it's not part of data engineering because that's where you work with somebody specialized in data management, like your DBA or whoever that role.
That's a very fair point. And to be fair, it's true of both Modules 8 and Module 9. We're in that grey area where actually you could argue this is data management as much as more than data engineering.
Or at least some of it.
Exactly. So we talk about server level firewall rules because, of course, when you're using Azure SQL database or SQL data warehouse, you've got to create a server. But we also talk about database level firewall rules as well.
Okay. Fair enough.
Then we talk about authentication. And notice here we're focusing on data stores, right? The SQL database, data warehouse. So we got SQL authentication or Azure Active Directory authentication, and the fact that authorization is done at role level, the permissions that are available there to ease that administration.
But we're not getting into the detail of the traditional database roles and so on.
Exactly, because that's not the level we want in the exam, right? To be fair, it's probably going to be at the level of authentication and authorization, or server level firewall versus database level firewall, or shared access signatures versus storage keys. That's what we're looking at.
And I think, but I do think so. That's where a lot of our trainers will come in with a wealth of experience and information. So they should have no problem getting to this level with that broader audience.
Absolutely. No, they'll be fine with this module, I'm sure. Dynamic data masking, we call out a very specific feature in SQL database because it is an exam objective domain. So we're putting that as a very specific topic as part of the data store security.
I do believe, though, that even on the exam, we kind of rescope that focus because when we did the initial exam development, one of the things that you look at from a subject matter expertise is they might have a more biased opinion on what they consider to be data engineering, while that's be very different than what we anticipated it to be. So I know we took some corrective actions on that in the exam.
Okay.
If we go to the exam portal and you look at the DP200 and DP201 exams, there actually has been a notification that has been put out on what has changed in the exam objective, which was based on the great work that our external and internal SMEs have done when we did that review workshop.
Yeah.
So,
well, regardless of where it's sitting in, if it's sitting in an exam or not, dynamic data masking is a very good, tool to have in your arsenal when it comes to securing your databases. So it's worth covering there. And then, of course, auditing and monitoring, and the fact that you can audit access and monitor who's been accessing it as well. Finally, securing streaming data, understanding stream analytics security, understand Event Hub security. What we're talking about here is the data that's in transit. Look, at the end of the day, you just need to know that Transport Layer Security v12 is what's used for all incoming and outgoing Azure Streaming Analytics data. Data at rest. Well, Stream Analytics doesn't store data. You use a data platform like Data Lake Store. So what I'm basically saying here is that really your Stream Analytics data at rest is incumbent on the security of the chosen data platform.
Fair point.
But there are security that you need to be aware of in event hubs. So there's authentication using shared access signatures and event publishers, so that only applications that are aware of that have the valid credentials to access that event hub. And that deals with the assignment of a token, because you know the shared access signature and you're on the event publishers.
Fair point.
Knowing that token, then Token Manager takes place, where it's used as an authentication mechanism with the event hub as well. And the review questions will just basically give you the opportunity to review that. The lab, it's an interesting one. What we're doing is we're looking at the implementation of security across the different technologies. So this is one of the labs where there isn't necessarily a one-to-one mapping with the actual
case study.
So it's probably actually worth going through this. This is the lab objectives to look at it, but they're all incumbent on basically setting security up on a data lake store, setting security up on I think it's SQL Data Warehouse, and then the Event Hub security as well. So again, we have the lab scenario, right, where it provides more context to a specific area of the case study. And then you've got the open questions to do the lab review. We finally call out the Microsoft Learn website directly.
Yeah, we've done that a couple of times.
You have, but from the perspective of the PowerPoint next steps. The Learn website has a really, really good content on role-based access permissions if any of your students want to learn more about it.
Not only that, that's also, well, you'll find a learning path that focuses on Azure security as part of that curriculum as well. So there's some really good modules that, we talked about Learn earlier, and we showed you a demo on our role-based certification and the content that resides there. Definitely around security and data security, Azure security in general. Really have a look and a take action item around the learning paths that do exist within that Azure security context as well.
And that covers security in the context of data engineering.
Perfect. So let's take it to the last module of the course. Let's have a look.